Welcome to the Radiantpreneur Rising Show with me, Jess Tomlinson. Interviews to inspire a new movement of leaders and entrepreneurs. The ones who lead with vulnerability and authenticity, stand in visibility, allowing themselves to truly be seen, are fierce and playful and sexy. Choose business as a spiritual practice. Seek collaboration versus competition. No, giving back is not an option. It's a necessity. They do it their way. They radiate. They rise. Now, let's rise together. All right. Welcome, everyone, to the Radiantpreneur Rising Show. Welcome back. I am Jess Tomlinson, and today we have a really special guest who I have actually never met before, but I'm so excited to get to know her and her mission and all about her organization. She has a really amazing story that I think is going to touch everyone's hearts. And hopefully my goal is that you will want to really step into more of a leadership, mentorship type role. You'll understand a little bit more when you learn more from Judith Martinez. So let's dive in. Welcome, Judith.
Thanks, Jess. Thank you for having me. And hello, all of the listeners that are listening to this. Thanks for listening.
Yay. Well, I want to start with the first and only question that I ask everyone. You know, my audience is entrepreneurs who are really walking the spiritual path of business. And for you, really leading your organization and being the visible woman that you are, I'm curious, what visibility edges are you leaning into in your life and business right now?
Oh, that's a really great question. I think, I think it's really great that you bring up, this whole notion of visibility. And I think the world that we live in now is very much that, right? With social media and so much at our fingertips. I think where I'm leaning to your point of visibility is really looking at, where in the world can we really propel this whole notion of being courageous, of not only for just women, but how does that become visible? How do you measure courage? How can you really implement that in different platforms and self-expressions in your life? Whether it like, how does that become visible for yourself and for your community? So I think that's really kind of what has been really on top of my mind when it comes to that, really, especially lately.
Yeah. Ooh, I like that, because one of my really core values of what I support women entrepreneurs in is self-expression, really being their full, authentic self, the whole range, and not feeling like they should be something. And I love how you come from this angle of courage, because it's a topic that I don't talk about very much. Mm-hmm. And yet, I just finished reading Brene Brown's book. I've read all of her books because I love her, and I bet you have too. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Have you read her latest, The Dare to Lead?
It's so funny that you mentioned that. I'm halfway through it. It was gifted to me from a mentor of mine. Yeah. But I love it. But please, yeah, continue.
Yeah. So the reason why that was coming up for me is because, in the book, she talks about how you can't have courage without vulnerability. And vulnerability is something that I talk about all the time, that I'm super passionate about, because I've really seen in my own life and business just the power of leading with vulnerability, whether it's in my relationships or, in my business. Mm-hmm. And it was really scary at first. And so I'm curious if you have any thoughts around the tie between vulnerability and courage.
Absolutely. I think, it's funny. A lot of people think when it comes to courage, obviously it's kind of like front of the hand, back of the hand, right? Like for you to be courageous, that means that there's also something to fear. And I think part of that fear that maybe not a lot of people go into, except for our dear friend Brene Brown, really, yeah. Part of being fearful is being vulnerable to something. Otherwise you wouldn't be afraid. There would be nothing to be afraid of if there was no possibility of being vulnerable. So I think it's really powerful that you bring up that point of vulnerability and its connection to courage, because I think part of it's not just about what are you afraid of so that you can be courageous, but it's almost opening yourself up to being vulnerable. Really, that's really at the heart of what you're afraid of. And I think there's an inextricable relationship between vulnerability and courage, and I think it's also something that doesn't come easily, right? I don't think that there's that many rooms that are strictly dedicated to practicing vulnerability as a channel for practicing courage too. So I think it's definitely connected, and they're kindred spirits in that way.
Yeah, I love that. So tell us more about why you chose for your organization as InHerShoes. Why did you choose courage as the main focus? And you can go ahead and explain a little bit about, who you support around courage. But I'm really curious why you chose this piece around courage.
Yeah, that's a really great part of, I think, daily as InHerShoes continues to grow, as I myself as a founder continues to grow. It's something that I constantly reflect on. And in an odd way, I feel like courage almost chose me, if that makes sense. Like I think it was, in my opinion, I think whatever it is that we create, whether you're an artist, you're an entrepreneur, you're, a business woman, or whatever it is that you choose to create in the world, whatever you create is a reflection of you. And whether you think it that way or not. And so I mention all this because courage really, I think, came about as something that I felt I always had and didn't know was missing in my life, but was this value that I always wanted to foster for myself and my community. So I think it almost kind of comes around creating what you wish you always had. And InHerShoes really stems from asking one question that's at the heart of our mission, which is, what would you do if you were 1% more courageous? And I think courage really came through as like the DNA of InHerShoes, because I really realized at the point of creating InHerShoes, or before InHerShoes even came to be, how afraid I really was of failure, of who I wanted to be, who did I need to be, expectations, afraid of, this big thing called life. And this was something, InHerShoes really came about after I graduated from university, which is quite a pivotal time in and of itself. But I think that's really when it came to manifest as this notion of courage, and what does it look like to live a life of courage.
Yeah, I was reading a little bit about your story and really appreciating you sharing around all the expectations in your family around, it sounds like you got accepted to law school and then you declined, and you're really worried about what your family would think because you're a first generation Filipina here, right? And I was just having so much appreciation for you sharing that story, because I know so much of, my life and a lot of people in my community gets really damped down because we try to live up to these different expectations that other people have of us. And so what would you say for anyone right now who is having a hard time letting go of the expectations that maybe their family has or other people have, or that they're even putting on themselves?
Well, I would definitely say, first off, it's okay that you're having a hard time. And I'd also say that having the hard time and even grappling with these expectations, and the fact that you're even at a place where you can almost analyze that, like to have the self-awareness and the moment of pause for yourself to even realize, oh, I'm living in expectations right now, I think is a huge step, as opposed to almost this default way of thinking of like, oh no, this is just my life. And I'm just doing what I want to do, as opposed to really taking some time to think, well, is this really authentic and a true self-expression for what it is that I'm creating? Or is it me living into an expectation that was kind of given to me? So I would definitely say it's okay that you're at where you're at. And I would say share about it. I think there's so much power in, to your point earlier, being vulnerable. And I think sometimes it's so, at least for me, I'll speak for myself, it's really easy for myself to get caught up in the knowing, right? Like, well, okay, I know that I'm living an expectation, but how do I not do that? Now let's fix it. Let's now go into the reversing of that. And sometimes you're just not going to know. And it's just a lifelong discovery, I think. Like, so I would say, talk about it, share about it, speak about it, work yourself through conversation to discover for yourself and give yourself the opportunity to find out what needs to happen for you. And I think I'd also say be generous with yourself, in whatever that looks like for you. I'm definitely still practicing and discovering what generosity for myself looks like, especially when it comes to expectations. So yeah, I'd say those things. You're okay with where you're at, share and speak up, and be generous.
Yeah. I love your point around, like, so often we don't know what that looks like. And so it's pretty scary. And I know one thing that I always say is, well, if you don't know what you want, what don't you want? And oftentimes, especially as women, I feel like we have to kind of start there sometimes. I know when I'm having calls with people who are curious about working with me or going to Bali with me, I think I saw that you take your team to Bali, or maybe, yeah. So
in the chapter there, so it's pretty neat.
Cool. I want to hear more about that. Because I'm looking for like a give back opportunity when I take women there. So we've gone to an orphanage in the past, which is of course great, but maybe there's something we can talk about there. And so, yeah, what I was saying is when I am having these calls, it seems like it's really tough for people to dream into, what they do actually want. And so it seems like I'm always kind of inviting myself and other people, well, if you don't know exactly what you want, continue coming back to what don't you want, because that's a great place to start. Yeah. So I love that you mentioned that. I'm curious, take us behind the scenes. Like, how did you get the courage to even realize that you were kind of trying to live up to your family's expectations? And then B, give yourself that permission to actually pave your own path. And how did you actually get there to that next step? I'm curious, like kind of the behind the scenes process that you went through.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. This is great. It always, I appreciate this question because it has me also take a look back and reflect on what the journey has been like and almost appreciate what it has been, right? I don't think we do that enough. So I mentioned briefly earlier that InHerShoes really came about after I graduated from university, and it came from me really realizing, before the question of what you would do if you're 1% more courageous, for me, the question was, what do you want? And that was probably scarier to ask, because I think it was, as a first generation student, I felt really fortunate to find myself in the rooms and in the university setting and in all of these situations that I never thought I had any right to, let alone belonged in. And I think for me, when I reached a point or when I received this coveted notion of success, which at that point in time was law school, what do you do when you finally get the thing that you wanted, only to realize it has nothing to do with what you want after all? And what does that mean about you? And what does it mean about the work that you've put into it? And so there were all of these things kind of going on in my mind. And it was my last semester of college where I felt really unhappy. And that for me was kind of the indicator of, I think that's what really started the bubbling of the, like, kind of really noticing I have everything that I should want, but why am I so unhappy? And it was scary to dare to say these things, because everyone around me was incredibly successful for whatever that looked like at a senior year, like university, about to graduate in the heart of Silicon Valley. You have friends, getting ready to go off working for all these big firms. You have people going to Google, like you name it. And here was little old me thinking, but do I want it? Is it okay to even ask that? can I ask that? Is it all right to not want this? Because everyone else wants it. So I feel like that's the right thing to want. So fast forward to when I finally got the acceptance letter, that for me was kind of the ultimate, I guess, indication of, yeah, there's something off here, because you are crying, but they're not tears of joy. They're almost like trying to catch for air and kind of make sense of what's going on. So I think, and what's funny is on the outside, I probably looked like I had it all together, to be completely honest. You know, I had all these accolades. I was a week from graduating. What's not to love about life? When really deep down inside, I was really sad and felt really lonely. And all of those things are indicators of, you know, you're not doing something. There's something off here, because it's just not registering for you. So that summer, I had already planned on going through this fellowship that was actually at the United Nations in New York. So that summer I knew, okay, well, I'll be kind of doing this fellowship. I'll figure things out. When really, if I was being honest with myself, I was just buying time to figure out what I was going to do. I ultimately declined my law school acceptance without telling anyone. I lied to my family about it, lied to my friends about it. And it was all in the name of, you know, almost this internal like gut feeling of like, I cannot go through with this, but also the fear of, but what am I going to say to people? Like, what, there's no backup plan here. Where am I heading? And so that summer, there was actually a conversation that I had with a woman in New York that I'd met. And she said to me that I think it wasn't some kind of, you know, epiphany moment, but she just had one question, which is funny because I look back and I think about a lot of the things that led to where I'm at now was a series of questions. And she asked me, what are you waiting for? And I kind of looked at her almost insulted that she had asked me this question, when really it was the thing that I probably needed to hear the most of what are you waiting for? And what she was alluding to was I had expressed all of these things and these passions for social entrepreneurship and social innovation and, you know, what the world could look like of having your business make a positive social impact, right? And the world of social impact was already living, but I just didn't think, you know, I didn't study business. Who was I? How dare I, you know, try to even consider myself fitting into that world? So there was always a flavor of not belonging, not being good enough. And I think at some point too, it almost became this dichotomy of, well, I'm not good enough, but I'm also too much at the same time. Like there was always some kind of juxtaposition.
What did you feel like you were too much of?
I think it was almost too much of asking questions that people don't really ask. You know, I should have known there was something going on. I was a philosophy major in college. So that probably should have been an indicator of like, oh, you're not one to really just kind of take things as they are. But, you know, there would be times during my last kind of few weeks of university where I would ask these questions to some, you know, peers of mine or counselors of mine, and they would kind of brush it off like, oh, like, well, why are you worrying about that? Like, you know, it was kind of just, you know, don't rock the boat. You got to accept it. Rock the boat, go for it. You know, this is what you've been working towards. So I think in that sense is what I mean by almost too much. Like you're asking too many questions. You're thinking about this too much. Just go with the plan, as opposed to, well, I don't know if that's the plan anymore. I don't know if I want that plan. So the fall of 2014 was when I really chose and decided, okay, I'm gonna go for it. I'm gonna bring this idea that I've always wished that I had growing up as a first generation Filipino woman. I'm gonna create it, whatever which way that looks like. And so we actually launched a Kickstarter campaign, which was kind of a version for me to one, gauge, is there even interest in this thing, or am I just crazy? And it was kind of a way to prototype really this concept of, you know, bringing courage into the world and having it take place in a social impact conversation, but also empowering women at the same time. So fast forward to now, we've opened up chapters in over 4 cities. We launched a chapter internationally just this last March in Bali. And we're just ongoingly growing through that question of what would you do if you're 1% more courageous?
Wow. So when you said we launched the Kickstarter campaign, who were those people that were in it with you?
Yeah, I mean, when I say we, I literally think about, my parents, like the friends that I could rally, volunteers. Like, it was very much a labor of love. By no means was it like pretty and neat and like there was no accelerator or pitch deck. No, it was very much grassroots. Like, we are fundraising money. There is this summit that we were fundraising money for, which is now our flagship program called the Catalyze Courage Summit. And it was kind of just, I think it was also a way for me to share with my community like what was going on. Kind of like, yeah, so I decided not to go to law school. I'm actually starting a Kickstarter campaign for this program that I want to launch. And I'm exploring creating a nonprofit. What are your thoughts? And so when I think of we, I don't think of InHerShoes as this thing that I created. I think about the community that has come around this question that I think is so universal and so needed to be asked.
Wow. And so I'm just so curious, like my partner is in videography, and he just got hired to do a Kickstarter campaign, and then they decided not to move forward with it. And so I'm really curious, because this is top of mind, like how scary that must have felt, because with Kickstarter, right, if you don't make your goal, you don't get any of the money, right? Yeah. So what were your feelings, and what did you actually have to do during the campaign to get enough support? Because I can imagine that that was such a vulnerable process. And I'm just sitting here in awe of you, like, wow, you just like, talk about courage. Right? Talk about practicing courage of asking for support.
Right. So funny. Yeah. I mean, biggest way to hold yourself accountable for anything is to create a company out of it. That's for sure. I'd say, well, it's funny when you mentioned video. Like, I remember, and God bless like my friends and my family for sticking through it with so much. I remember like shooting things on our like, point and shoot Olympic camera from 2000, or like, iteration iPhone 4, right? Like at that point to formulate this video, because there's so many, and not just distinctly with Kickstarter, but I think with fundraising in general, there's just so much that goes into it. And it was definitely, everything from, I think timing is also an interesting thing when it comes to any kind of crowdfunding, especially. I think it was also, Kickstarter back then, which is crazy to even say, in 2014 was, popular, but it also wasn't that used up yet. So there was still this level of intrigue, right? Of like, oh, crowdfunding, what is that? And now there's like 10, a dozen, hundreds of, forms to crowdfund now, as opposed to back then. But I think it was really deciding to do that as one, a form of generating, interest, almost bringing it to market and seeing if there is any kind of traction that we could building a brand that without us even really knowing it, right? And then thirdly, almost having to really hone in and strategize, like, well, what does this look like? And then what? If we were to successfully fund, or if we don't reach the goal, because it's very much high stakes, right? All or nothing. So it really took a lot for myself and, the team of people that I had brought in as volunteers, a family of friends, to really think about, what are we really asking people to give to? And that was really the first moment where I realized, wow, how do you measure courage? And how can you mobilize people to take interest in that? And why should it matter? And I think it really was the beginning of learning to tell the story of not only InHerShoes, but the power of storytelling, really. And I think now in the world of media, and kind of your first question of visibility, there's so much things to bring to light through storytelling. And I think that was really what helped give InHerShoes the push that we really needed in the beginning. And I think it can seem very daunting and overwhelming to think about, whether you are choosing to crowdfund, or maybe you're at a point of discovering what your own story is to tell people. I think storytelling is something to never underestimate, especially when it's authentic and it becomes something that anyone can relate to.
Yeah, I love that. So what stories did you tell? Did you tell specific stories of women, of yourself? And was that part of being able to, in your opinion, like successfully raise the funds?
Yeah, I think so. I think, the video, and again, I'm not familiar anymore with the world of Kickstarter crowdfunding, but,
Yeah.
they give you like certain, criteria, right? Like you need to have X amount of things, you need to have this page filled out, you need to have a video, and they prefer that it's, within this minute and that minute. And and it's all in the world of, you have to make sure you get your point across and tell the story effectively, and also have a call to action, ideally. And I think for the approach that at least we chose to take was sharing why is it relevant, and almost sharing in a way the statistics behind what it's like for women in the workplace, in the world, when it comes to confronting their level of confidence, to entrance rates at universities for first generation students. So I think telling those actual statistics and factoids, but also I think this was also the beginning where I got to learn how every stat, every data point, every analytic tells a story of a person. And it's not just a number, it's a life. So I think that allowed it to kind of bleed into, telling the story of myself, which then kind of led to the stories of all the volunteers, of why were they rallying around this random Kickstarter that was being planned, in Southern California for this one-day summit. So yeah, I think that was definitely something that we created.
Yeah, tying things to like the bigger vision, and then also making them really relatable. I can really resonate with that and see how powerful that is from my years in corporate. We're in marketing, and that's all marketing is being able to effectively tell stories and move people emotionally, and connect them to something that's possible or bigger. And so I love that. Beautiful. So I'm curious, like, how has the business evolved, except for, of course, expansion, which is exciting. Wow, like 4 locations and the international location in Bali. That's really amazing. How else has it evolved? Has it evolved in, the core mission, or what have you seen shift and change?
Yeah. When you ask that question, 2 things come to mind. I'd say, we've definitely evolved in terms of like a team, like the physical people who are supporting this mission-driven organization, and kind of, for me, learning like, wow, the power of team, one, but also to knowing the right people and skill sets and passions to align with a mission. And how, I think that's something that I don't think anyone teaches that in school. You can get an MBA, you can go to business school, but when it comes to the power of a relationship, or, actually building out a culture of a company, what does that look like on the ground? So I think definitely what shifted has been, I can't even count anymore how many times we've, built up some kind of program thinking, okay, yeah, we need to find someone or hire someone that would support in building this out, when really we needed to look at operations, or maybe logistics were actually something to look into. So I think that's something that has definitely shifted. And I think too, it would be to your point when you say, the mission and the vision. I would say the mission still definitely holds true, but I think how do we express that in the world has definitely changed. And it's exhilarating and terrifying at the same time at how quickly the world evolves, especially with media. But I would definitely say over this last year, we've really been exploring, and also I would dare to say, kind of pushing, what does this conversation look like, not just for women, but when we welcome men into the conversation, right? What does it look like because at the end of the day, at least my personal philosophy is, women are making huge strides in the world and there's still so much more to go. And there's only so much further we can go without the support of our counterparts, right? In whatever capacity or whatever room or whatever relationship that looks like. And so over this last year, we've kind of been, developing different programs, different conversations, different experiences to really begin to delve into and curate, well, gosh, what does that look like? What does it look like for a late 20-something individual millennial who is on the, exploring his own adulthood, his own manhood in this world where women are, to Bumble's point, making the first move in life, right? Like in every aspect, in every arena. And how could they support that? Or what are their stances on that? And how could we really build out a movement that really is inclusive of both sides of the table? So yeah, I would say that has also shifted too, and discovering and fumbling and iterating over and over again what that looks like.
Yeah. And did that really being, it sounds like you're in the question of that, did that come really from you, or did that come from an observation of like kind of what your community wants, or maybe a little of both?
Yeah, I would definitely say a little bit of both. I think, it was something that I personally experienced in my own life and then began to look at, well, how does this reflect in InHerShoes? And that's something that I'm ongoingly learning, I think, as a founder, as an entrepreneur, of as much as I think things are separate in my life, they're not. And my personal life will absolutely impact my business and vice versa. But, I have an older brother and he's 4 years older than me. And, looking at my relationship with him growing up, with my dad, all of these great male friends that I have around me. And then I would kind of notice that in my conversations with them, I felt like there was only so much I could share about when it came to InHerShoes. And I noticed kind of like, what is that? There's something there that has me not fully be vulnerable or divulge like what's actually on my mind, or where InHerShoes is heading in terms of the programs and the conversations we're stirring up. And so I think that was kind of the beginning for me personally, where I started to notice that shift. And then I think too, as a community, I started to notice that at our last summit in Austin, Texas, where it was the first time where our partner high schools asked, oh, can we nominate boys to attend? And it was kind of a funny, like, we never really thought about that. Actually, no one's ever asked that question before. And so I think, again, over this last year, it's kind of come from both sides, where the community has brought it up, but also internally for myself, it's been a question too.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I've been having similar questions. Well, especially a few years ago, actually, it was a little more on my mind because I was a relationship coach. A while ago, like for a year, I like tried the relationship coach focus. And that was something that I was super curious about because I knew personally the power, I lead in-person women's groups. And then of course, like my retreat to Bali, and I'm a coach for women entrepreneurs. And I'm really passionate about like the container that's held and the space that's needed for women to deeply connect, and even just healing those wounds between us, like as women, as a sisterhood, right? And the power that is created with that. And yet, yeah, there's this like pull of like, well, how do we bring in the men? And I want to do that more. And I've seen some of my really good friends, one in particular, Tanya Lynn, she's in San Diego. Quite a few years ago, she held circles where it was like men and women, and like one was focused on healing the masculine, one was focused on healing the feminine, and I just thought that was so beautiful. So yeah, I love that you're in this question, and I'm curious, how did you deal with answering the schools when they asked if they could nominate?
Yeah, it definitely took myself and my other team member who was there with me, Kat, aback. But how we had answered it really was, at this point in time, the program that we've developed was really geared towards young women, but it's something that, we're going to explore, and we're going to get back to you on that, actually. And so something that we did last summer, right after the summit, was actually run a summer camp for the first time ever for both boys and girls at a high school in Los Angeles. And that was one of the most, I think when I think about the timeline and the most memorable moments of a founder, I think that's definitely up there in the top 3, just because I'm not going to lie. It's been for, I'd say, the world, but also the country that is the United States of America. It's been a very tumultuous time politically, I would say the least. And it was the first time that I had heard a young person, but a young boy, quote our president. And that scared me a little.
Well, what was the quote? I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean,
do you remember?
I don't remember it verbatim, but he was pretty much referencing the tweets that he was like pretty much going.
Wow.
Right? And it was one of those moments where I thought, I mean, granted, I wouldn't say I'm completely I'm not wise by any means. I haven't reached a certain age where I feel like I have any right to be an expert on anything. But as someone who is a founder of an organization committed to a level of diversity, inclusion, and, really broadening our horizons through the conversation of courage, it was really scary to hear this incoming freshman high school boy quote the president of the United States and justify something that he had said because of a tweet that our president had, mentioned to the public. And, by no means was there any kind of right or wrong, but it was one of those moments where I realized, wow, these are the little moments that lead to the bigger moments of whatever life or movement or conversation is. I think that was the first time where I noticed that interaction, and it made me think, wow, there's work to be done here. Like there's something here that needs to be addressed or needs to be talked about, or even a safe space to talk about it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I would say that that's kind of been a big thing ever since, looking at, when you mentioned the masculine, the feminine, but also inviting the other side into the conversation. So.
Yeah, I really appreciated one of your posts that you did on the in-between moments. Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm hearing in this. It's like, oftentimes we think of those extreme moments as like making the biggest difference, but it's kind of like the pervasive moments that are happening behind the scenes that are really shaping, the future of like how we think and how we act. And I feel like this point is also coming back to like you being what I consider a very great rebel, a revolutionary really, of like, you're willing to ask the hard questions. And I think so many people are not, that they will just take the information and digest it as truth. Like I feel like as a collective, we're both waking up and also still struggling with this like laziness of like, just give me the easy way, feed me the information. I don't want to think. I don't want to have to question things, right? Because then things get sticky and then everything's up for question. And yet I feel like that is such an important part of like really developing like ourselves as like humans, but also like, evolving in communities. And yeah, so any thoughts on that?
I think it's brilliant what you're onto right now. I think it's great. I love that you mentioned, I think that's definitely accurate. We as a collective are both awakening, and also I think it's also really, it takes courage to be able to, one, wake up, but then to stay awake, right? I think it's when you're confronted with hard truths or maybe ugly truths, it's very easy to be like, no, what? No, we're gonna go back to sleep. We're gonna close our eyes. We're gonna do the easy way, and we're gonna work smarter, not harder, right? Because we're in this digital age, and we can spin stories and make anything, almost, it's so real, it's almost unreal, right? Like everything is kind of, it's a bizarre time, I think, but at the same time, there's so much opportunity in it. But I do think, to your point, there's almost I think there's a need, there's a demand, whether it comes from us or there's just become so much pressure that something has to give at some point, where new questions have to be asked, or perhaps certain questions that have been asked that haven't really been answered need to finally be answered. And I think too, there's people like you, right, who have this platform, who have this voice, who has the level of self-awareness and the ability to bridge conversations amongst people. I think, it's up to the collective rebellious spirit of us who want to ask these questions, who dare to ask these questions, where it becomes a responsibility on our part, right? And then comes the question of, okay, well, how can we self-generate as these leaders to continuously ask these questions and not be disenchanted by the world that we live in? It's a lot. It's like, oh my gosh, it almost gets messier before you can actually approach the problem, I feel like. But
Yes.
so many people are afraid of the mess.
Yeah. I feel like this was leading in really well to this question that I have for you, which is, what do you think people need in order to be courageous? Which is what I'm hearing from you is like, well, first you got to kind of like break it down and get all messy, which I believe always the first step to anything. Like, release is always my first step. And it's like, I have to like, give people like general steps, which I hate to do anyways. But in all of my coaching, it's like, look, if you're going to come to me and we're going to work together, first we're going to release all the crap. And it's going to be a constant releasing, but first we're going to focus on that. Because it's so necessary. We have so many like, things that we just need to kind of like vomit up and let go of and work through. But for you, I don't want to influence your answer here. What do you feel like people need to be more courageous?
Oh, Jess, you're just hitting me with these questions today. I love them. What do I think?
You don't have to like know the answer, but just like whatever's present here, I know things always change.
No, I love it. It's funny. What comes to mind when you ask that question is, I think the thing again, my personal opinion, the thing that we say that we want the most, usually whatever it is that we're resisting simultaneously at that time, is what we also need the most. So, for example, if there's a student of ours that we've had in the past that is an alum of our programs, and for her, she wanted, what she really wanted in her self-expression of being 1% more courageous looked like accepting or having the level of acceptance from her family that she's gay, and that she never shared that with anyone. But the thing that was keeping her from that was, actually telling people that she was gay, right? So there's almost this kind of, the very thing that sometimes stops us from the thing that we want is actually what we have to go through and confront to get there. And so, I mention all this because I think what people, for me, in my personal opinion, and I'll speak for myself in my own life, I think to be courageous, you first have to really, one, be powerful enough, be courageous enough, which is ironic because you need to muster up the very thing that you want, to admit that, one, you're not really courageous at this moment, or maybe you to be vulnerable enough to say, I am afraid, or to admit that, my life really isn't going the way that I really wanted it to go right now. Because I think, to your point, this level of, surrender or release is kind of the first step to it all, because, you can't know where you're going unless you know where you're starting right now. And I think you can apply that to almost anything, in my opinion. I mean, if you plan a trip to Bali, you're probably going to need to know what airport you're going to fly out of first to get there, right? Or like, you're probably going to need to be aware of and present to where you're currently at. And I think to even be present, my goodness, what I think there's so that sometimes it's too much to be present. And I think from what I've seen from either students or different women we've worked with, it's almost too painful to be present. And so we numb ourselves with the busyness of life, or, all of these other conversations or challenges, when really it just takes being okay with where you're at and being able to say whatever it is that's really there. So I would definitely say that when it comes to being courageous is mustering up the power to be vulnerable, and how powerful being vulnerable actually is. And then I'd also say, I don't think, by no means do I believe courage is a single solo trip. I think sometimes we think, things have to be grandiose, or I have to do it alone, because if I don't do it alone, then maybe it's not really my own accomplishment. But I think it's important to build community around whatever it is that you're going through, which is why I always encourage to share, speak up, say something, even if it's, I want to say something and I don't know what to say. So I'd say those would be the two things that I think would be steps in the right direction of being courageous.
Yeah. I love that. So it sounds like really just being honest with yourself, where you're at, the vulnerability to actually just share and release, knowing that like it might not look like what you think it's going to be, and the space to be able to speak, and even if you don't know what you're going to say, which I love that piece, because one of the core kind of principles is a weird word, but I'm just going to go with it because that's what's coming to mind. One of the core principles of when I lead women's groups is that everybody has the space to share, and like we take the time for each person to be heard, because I know that not everybody is like me and will just speak up and is a little bit more like extroverted, like there are, like, I don't know if you've read Susan Cain's book, Quiet, The Power of Introverts.
So great. Yeah, I love that. As an introvert myself, I would say it's super good. So that really opened my eyes back when I was a marketing manager, leading teams, because I just kind of expect, like, well, if you have something to say, like, this is a safe space, like anybody can speak up, but that's not always the case for people that feel like they don't have a place to share, or they're just more shy, or whatever it is. I love that that's part of your mission, and I see that on social media, because it seems like you're always in groups, which I love, like in person with people, like, and I think that is a huge part of healing people, the planet, and I just want to thank you for doing that work, because I think it can be really easy to stay behind our screens and not be in person with people. And I really believe that that's what people need right now, is that human connection. So thank you for doing that. Thank you. I mean, we're definitely creating, I would say, the same thing. So I appreciate you and the work that you're doing too. So
thank you.
Yeah.
I'm curious, as we kind of like lead towards wrapping up, I want to make sure that I ask you, how did you decide between a for-profit business and a nonprofit? You probably get this question a lot, but I really think it'd be helpful for our audience to hear, how you made that decision, because I know a lot of women that I coach that have their own businesses, they have dreams of having nonprofits. So can you share with us how you made that decision?
Yeah, it was a difficult decision for a lot of different reasons, but I think the biggest part, to your point, and I'm kind of going to loop it back to something that you said earlier in the conversation, is, sometimes you start with what you don't want, right? I think for me, I didn't exactly know, okay, I'm going to create a nonprofit, and these are the 10 bullet points as to why. But it was really about, one, I knew that I wanted to create a community that was accessible to as many people as possible. And I think especially growing up in the communities that I grew up in, I didn't see that many opportunities to engage with different nonprofits, let alone even knowing what a nonprofit was, that could provide what I envisioned InHerShoes could be. So that was one thing. But I think too, I really wanted InHerShoes to be something that, for the lack of a better word, didn't have profit be the number one key performance indicator for us. I mean, granted, you still run it like a business, right? I think that's also another trap that some people fall into, is just because you're not for profit or an NGO, well then, all cards are on the table. Like, you just kind of do whatever it is that you want. I think if anything,
Right.
it's more challenging to run a not-for-profit
Yeah.
than a for-profit, because of still operating it like a business. But there's also this major mission that is really at the crux and at the forefront of what your business is about. And that for me was something that I really wanted to delve into. And I think there was also a big part of me that, and who knows, maybe I've never been called a rebel before until you actually. So I'm like, wow, am I a rebel? But I don't think so. But the words that are coming out of my mouth kind of sound rebellious when I think about it.
You are. And I just want to reflect real quick to not interrupt you totally, but I think that oftentimes people are discounted if they're not like the stereotypic rebel, which is like, like rah, and like you're a soft-spoken rebel, but I think that actually that serves you because that's who you are. And so you're able to come at it from this really grounded place. And that's like one of the things that I'm passionate about, is really seeing people in their unique form of genius, but also those layers underneath that like they don't really realize are their gifts, and helping them like bring those out a little bit more. So I would say, yes, girl, you
Oh my
rebel.
God. I love it. Thanks, Jess.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah. And, like, to highlight literally what you just said, and the layers, I think in the layers of creating InHerShoes and really taking time to make a conscious decision of, okay, it's going to be a not-for-profit. I really wanted to break this notion or the stereotype that you can't do what you love and make it a career. Like, surely that can't be possible. Surely in this day and age, we don't need to succumb to climbing the corporate ladder because there's no other choice, and paying our dues before we can make an impact. And I think that was the level of, there was a level of disillusionment that I experienced around that exact conversation upon graduating from university, where I felt, how is it I could be in this community that fostered possibility, but then also be told at the end of the day, well, wait on the possibility. Let's be practical first. Let's be practical, and then let's be in possibility. But then at that point, it's like, well, it's not possibility anymore. It's something else. I don't know what that is. So I think there's that, I'm going to call it now, that rebellious side of me, I guess, that was kind of like, no, I'm going to actually build the thing that I wish that I had, and show girls that look like me and who don't look like me that you could do it too. It's not going to be easy, but it's possible. And you don't have to wait till you're a certain age or have a certain degree to do it. So yeah, I think those have been the main motivators of choosing a nonprofit.
Yeah. Great. That's really great insight. And I love that you said, it's like, it's actually sometimes more responsibility being a not-for-profit. And I think that's great for people to hear, to really like consider the different options and to do their research. So thank you for sharing your decision.
That was great.
Yeah. So I'd love to hear, like, what are ways that people can get involved with your movement?
Yeah. I love it when people get involved.
Yeah.
Ways that people can get involved really array from, attending an actual event. So we have a yearly summit that happens every year. You can decide to bring InHerShoes to your own community, and there's opportunities to be a host of one of our monthly events that we have called Cup of Courage, where you can literally gather a community of women around you and help facilitate this conversation. And you're paired with a team member from InHerShoes that'll help prep you. Like, you get set up for that kind of conversation. You could donate if you'd wish to a scholarship fund that we have running. You can also just literally something as simple as subscribing to a newsletter or following us on InHerShoes' social media. I think really the best way for people to get involved is taking part in the conversation. And I think something that's been exciting for us recently is a lot of people who come from the corporate world, who do represent different sides of the table, have reached out to us to really start creating programming for more of the corporate conversation, for engaging in corporate social responsibility and what that looks like. So that's also a way to get involved too, is helping us look at what are the best ways to serve every individual, but especially different women who are working in different places in their life.
Yeah, beautiful. And if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way that they can do that?
Yeah, so they can definitely visit us on our website, which is www.inhershoesmovement.org. And you can send an email to us at catalyze@inhershoesmovement.org. And that's really the best way for us to connect. And you can also just feel free to comment on any of our social media platforms, and a team member will be in touch with you too.
Awesome. Beautiful, Judith. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you just want to share, or final words of wisdom to wrap up?
No, I think you asked everything, really. I just want to take this time to thank you for holding the space for courage to be nourished and to flourish on the planet. I think something that's been a huge personal belief, and I think also has been embedded in the philosophy of InHerShoes, is everything, there's nothing impossible that can't be really addressed through the power of conversation. And I think, you create and cultivate that space. So I just want to thank you, and to all your listeners and the communities that you're touching and highlighting radiant entrepreneurs everywhere. So thank you for having me. It's been such an honor.
You are so welcome. It's been a pleasure. I have so many more questions that I could have asked you, and I love this conversation on courage. But we're going to wrap it up for now. And just, if anybody wants to find the direct links or learn more about Judith, the show notes will be over on episode 20. So the link is jessicatomlinson.com/show-20. And we will see you guys next time. Bye.
Bye.